Keep your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the ride at all times. Because today, we're not just talking about the roller coasters. We're talking about the decades when amusement parks were basically giant experiments with cotton candy, wooden coasters with sketchy bolts, dark rides with bad wiring, fair rides that just rolled into town on the back of a truck, water slides that trusted gravity a little too much, and warning signs that were written because somebody somewhere made a very bad decision. Today, we are stepping through the deadliest decades of amusement park history. From the early 1900s, when parks were built fast and safety came second, to the thrill-crazed 70s and 80s when rides got bigger, faster, loopier, and deadlier. Then we'll move into the 90s, where everything became extreme, neon, and legally complicated. And finally, the modern era, where amusement parks are safer than ever, but when something does go wrong, it comes with lawsuits, viral videos, investigations, and probably a comment section full of people saying, "I knew that ride looked scary," because theme parks are magical. They are bright lights, funnel cakes, fake screams, real screams, overpriced water bottles, and that weird moment at the top of a drop tower where you suddenly remember every bad thing you have ever done. Is that just me? Maybe that's just me. But behind the laughter, behind the midway music, behind the perfectly themed entrance sign, there is a darker history. So today, we're asking, which decade was the deadliest? Put your guesses in now. Were the early theme parks more dangerous because nobody knew what they were doing? Were the 70s and 80s the most chaotic because thrill rides were exploding faster than safety laws could keep up? Or is the modern era scarier now because the rides are high-tech, the stakes are higher, and every tragedy becomes a headline before the park gates even close? So buckle up, read the warning signs, do not climb the fence, do not stand up on the coaster, do not try and break a water slide record with 30 of your closest friends, and absolutely do not trust a ride just because it has flashing lights and a teenager named Maverick checking your lap bar. This is Death Kiss Traveler. My name is Marissa, your morbidly curious host. And if you love creepy amusement park history, haunted rides, circus lore, and the dark side of places that are supposed to make us smile, come follow me on TikTok and Instagram. I'm sharing behind-the-scenes research, old newspaper finds, creepy park stories, and extra facts that don't always make it into these episodes. Now, buckle up, my friends. Today, we are going through the decades to the dark side of amusement park history, where the rides were built for fun, but sometimes became fatal. In the early 1900s, amusement parks were exploding across America. If you have listened to most of my other episodes, we talk about early history of amusement parks in the 1900s, and it was crazy. The cities wanted bigger parks, bigger crowds, bigger rides. And for millions of people living in crowded industrial cities, these parks felt magical. Places like Coney Island became symbols of escape. Electric lights covered the skyline, and that's what people needed back then. There were massive roller coasters being built, and they were rattling overhead. Music echoed through the crowded midways, and for many visitors, it felt like stepping into the future. But behind the excitement was a dangerous reality. Parks were being built incredibly fast, and safety, well, that came second. There was almost no national ride regulations at the time, no standardized inspections, no modern restraint systems, and very little understanding of crowd safety. Many rides were built almost entirely from wood. Wooden tracks, wooden supports, wooden stations, combined with early electrical systems that were often unreliable and hazardous. And as parks competed to build taller, faster, and more shocking attractions, corners were cut. Some roller coasters were so rough they became known for throwing passengers against the side of the cars. Lap bars were minimal or non-existent, And seatbelts, well, those often didn't exist at all. And injuries were far more common than parks wanted the public to know. But roller coasters weren't the only danger. One of the deadliest threats during the early amusement park era was fire. In 1911, a devastating blaze tore through Dreamland, located on Coney Island in Brooklyn, New York, one of the most famous amusement parks in the world. Dreamland was designed to look almost unreal. White towers, massive attractions, millions of electrical lights. But much of the park was built from highly flammable materials. When the fire began, it spread with terrifying speed, and within hours, the park was completely destroyed. Animals trapped inside attractions burned alive, buildings collapsed, entire sections of the park vanished into smoke and ash. Witnesses described the flames as so massive they could see it across New York Harbor. If you want more information on this fire, I actually did a whole episode on the incubator babies at Dreamland, and I do talk about that fire more in depth. So go back in those episodes. It's called The Incubator Babies of Coney Island. It's an absolute fascinating episode. And while the Dreamland fire remains one of the most infamous, it wasn't unique because early parks burned often. Electrical failures, faulty wiring, overcrowded buildings, cheap construction, all created a perfect condition for disaster. And then there were the rides themselves. During the 1910s and 1920s, roller coaster accidents became increasingly common. As parks pushed for more extreme designs, wooden coaster structures occasionally collapsed under stress. Cars sometimes derailed, passengers were thrown from rides entirely. At a time when newspapers sensationalized tragedy, shocking amusement park accidents became front-page stories. But many smaller incidents, well, they were quietly hidden, and a lot of times they didn't even stop the rides after an accident. Because amusement parks depend on one thing above all else: public confidence. If guests believe a park was dangerous, the crowds disappeared. So accidents were minimized, deaths were downplayed, and parks kept building faster. And places like Luna Park and Dreamland, competition became reckless. Each park wanted the tallest ride, the brightest lights, the biggest spectacle. Safety innovations simply couldn't keep up. And overcrowding made everything worse. On busy summer nights, thousands upon thousands of people packed into narrow boardwalks and ride queues. There were stampedes, structural strain, electrical overloads, all became real dangers. Looking back now, it's almost unbelievable how little oversight existed. Today, riders expect computerized restraints, daily inspections, engineers, and emergency systems at least. But during the early park era, many attractions were essentially giant mechanical experiments operating in front of the public. And sometimes those experiments failed catastrophically. Still, despite the danger, people kept coming because these parks represented something powerful: escape, wonder, excitement, and for a few hours, visitors could forget the factories, the crowded cities, the hardships of everyday life. Even if hidden beneath the lights and laughter was a real risk. Amusement park rides have been around since the mid to late 1800s, and in almost every episode of early park history, there are accidents. But would it surprise you that those early years were not the deadliest decade? By the 1950s, amusement parks were entering a brand new era. America was changing, the war was over, families were moving to the suburbs, and cars filled the highways. Suddenly, amusement parks weren't just dirty little carnival grounds anymore. They were becoming destinations. Bright, futuristic, almost utopian. Parks promised families a vision for the future. And nowhere represented that future more than Disneyland, which opened in 1955. It changed everything. Suddenly, parks across America raced to modernize. Cleaner midways, faster rides, bigger attractions, new technology. But even as parks looked safer, many still weren't. Because behind the scenes, the industry was growing faster than safety standards could keep up. Roller coasters were getting larger, ride systems were becoming more complex, and millions more people were pouring through park gates every summer. The 1950s and 1960s created a dangerous illusion that amusement parks had become completely safe. Accidents kept happening, and some were horrifying. One of the deadliest disasters connected to amusement entertainment during this era happened in 1956 at the Dromcollere Big Dipper disaster in Ireland. A traveling roller coaster known as the Big Dipper suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure during operation. As the ride was moving at full speed, part of the structure failed. Cars derailed violently, passengers were thrown from the ride into the wreckage below. The accident killed multiple riders and injured dozens more. Witnesses described twisting metal, shattered wooden supports, and of course, panic spreading throughout the crowd as people rushed toward the destroyed coaster. The disaster became one of the deadliest roller coaster accidents of the decade, and it exposed something terrifying. Many rides were still being assembled, operated, and inspected with shockingly inconsistent standards, especially traveling attractions. Some rides were moved from town to town, rebuilt repeatedly, and operated under different crews every season. And sometimes critical mistakes were missed. Meanwhile, in permanent parks across America, smaller accidents continued happening regularly. You had restraint failures, riders thrown from coasters, electrical fires were still happening, mechanical breakdowns, drowning incidents on water rides. But unlike today, many of those incidents barely made national headlines because at this point, parks often handled accidents quietly. Because during the golden age of family entertainment, image meant everything. No park wanted families thinking about death while they were standing beneath the glowing neon lights and cheerful music. I was that weird kid who was standing in line thinking about who had died on that ride. Many coasters that were built in the 1920s were still in operation into the 50s and 60s. By then, some were aging so badly. Tracks warped over time, supports weakened, and maintenance crews constantly fought against weather, rot, and structural stress. Riders described some coasters as feeling violent. Not thrilling, violent. Cars slammed against tracks, restraints felt loose, and injuries were sometimes treated as just part of the ride. But despite the risk, the public loved it. This was the era of American optimism. Families wanted excitement, teenagers wanted speed, and parks competed to build rides that felt bigger and more futuristic every single year. The atomic age had arrived, and amusement parks wanted to look like tomorrow. By the end of the 1960s, parks had become larger than ever before. But the truly dangerous decade was still coming. Because in the 1970s, the thrill ride arms race would explode, and so would the accidents. If the 1950s were the golden age of the family amusement park, then the 70s and 80s were the era of pure thrill-seeking chaos. This was when parks stopped asking, how magical can we make this? And they started asking, how far can we push people before they're terrified? Roller coasters became taller, faster, steeper. Looping coasters exploded in popularity, and water parks appeared everywhere. Drop rides launched riders into the air and dropped them. And parks competed in what basically became as a full-blown thrill war. Every park wanted the tallest coaster, the fastest launch, the biggest inversion, the most shocking attraction in the world. And sometimes safety struggled to keep up. Because during the 70s and 80s, amusement parks were expanding at an unbelievable pace. Major parks were opening across the country. Six Flags was exploding in popularity, and even smaller regional parks grew in popularity, and everybody wanted to go during the summer. Millions of guests flooded through gates every single year. But beneath the neon lights and screaming riders, some parks were becoming dangerously experimental. And no place represents that era better than Action Park. I've never done an episode on Action Park. I have it written up, but it's about 4 episodes long, and I don't know if you guys would really want to know more about Action Park. I feel like it is the most famous theme park accident location. Let me know if you guys want the Action Park series. It is wild. Because even today, Action Park has almost become mythology. People call it Traction Park, Class Action Park, the world's most dangerous amusement park. And honestly, those nicknames weren't exaggerated. It opened in 1978 in New Jersey, and Action Park was unlike almost anything America had ever seen before. The park featured giant alpine slides, looping water slides, cave pools, cliff jumps, and many attractions felt less like engineered rides and more like dangerous experiments. Employees, they were often teenagers. Some ride operators there reported they had little or no training, and guests were encouraged to push the limits. The atmosphere was wild, and people described the park as feeling almost lawless, and accidents became constant. One of the most infamous attractions was the Alpine Slide. Guests rode small wheeled carts down a long concrete and fiberglass track winding down a mountainside. They actually have Alpine slides all over the country still. But the problem is that people control their own speed, and this ride was a little scarier than any of those others, because riders would frequently lose control, scraped skin off on the pavement, or slammed into other riders. According to former employees and guests, injuries were so common that employees allegedly referred to the bloody abrasions as Action Park tattoos. Oh, that's so bad. And then there was the wave pool, and it was nicknamed the Grave Pool by some employees because the waves were reportedly so strong that weak swimmers would quickly panic or disappear beneath the crowd, and multiple drownings occurred at the park over the years. But perhaps the most infamous ride of all was the Cannonball Loop, a looping water slide that looked almost impossible. Guests were shot downward through an enclosed tube and even through a complete vertical loop. Early tests, they reported horrifying problems. Test dummies came out with missing pieces. But they sent people down, and early reports had a lot of bloody people. And according to park legends, employees allegedly offered cash to workers willing to test the ride themselves. Whether that's true or not, I'm not sure. I'm going to have to dive deeper into that one. But the ride became infamous almost instantly, and it perfectly represented the mindset of that era. Bigger, crazier, more extreme, even if no one fully understood the risks yet. So if you want a full deep dive episode of Action Park, let me know in the comments. At Six Flags Great Adventure, one of the deadliest amusement park disasters in American history occurred in 1984. It wasn't on a ride, but inside a haunted attraction. The Haunted Castle fire began inside the park's Haunted Castle attraction. The building was dark, maze-like, filled with flammable materials. When fire broke out, smoke spread rapidly through the attraction. Guests became trapped inside the darkness, and some couldn't find exits. Others became disoriented in the smoke-filled corridors. 8 teenagers died, and investigators discovered something horrifying. The attraction reportedly lacked proper sprinklers and sufficient fire safety precautions. The Haunted Castle fire became a turning point for amusement attraction safety regulations across the country, and it reminded the public that even themed attractions, not just the thrill rides, could become deadly. If you want more information on this one, I did a whole entire episode on the Haunted Castle fire. I'm going to link all of these episodes in my show note. Meanwhile, roller coasters themselves were becoming more aggressive than ever before. In the late 70s and 80s, they saw a rise in massive steel looping coasters. Parks wanted rides that looked impossible. Vertical loops, corkscrews, high-speed drops, and although steel technology improved many aspects of coaster safety, the push for innovation sometimes created new dangers. Riders reported blacking out. Whiplash injuries became very common, and mechanical failures, they still happened. Some coasters became infamous for roughness so intense that people left with bruises and neck pain. But despite the accidents, people absolutely loved it. This was the era of adrenaline. America wanted bigger thrills, more speed, more danger, and amusement parks, they delivered. Because during the 70s and 80s, parks stopped trying to simply entertain guests. They wanted to shock them. And honestly, for a while, it worked. But by the late 1980s, lawsuits, attention, and growing public concern were beginning to change the industry. The freewheeling chaos of the thrill ride was slowly colliding with modern safety expectations. And I'm going to talk about 3 of the most horrific ride accidents during this era. So the 1970s, amusement parks are a very strange place. On one hand, they're becoming bigger, bolder, and more exciting. And the whole industry is leaning hard onto one promise. Come here, scream your face off, and have the best day of your life. But on the other hand, a lot of these rides are still old. Some are wooden, some have been repaired over and over again, and some have had parts replaced with whatever can be found. They didn't make replacement parks for 1920s roller coasters. So some of these rides are operating in a world where amusement safety is still nowhere what we expect today. And one of the worst examples of that happened on May 30th, 1972, at Battersea Park Fun Fair in London, England. Now, Battersea Park Fun Fair wasn't some tiny roadside carnival. It was a real London attraction. The fun fair opened in 1951 as part of the Festival of Britain. And for decades, it was a place where families, teenagers, and kids from all over London came for a day out. The leading attraction was a massive wooden roller coaster called the Big Dipper. They weren't really creative with their names back then, huh? I feel like every wooden roller coaster was named the Big Dipper. But the Big Dipper was the skyline ride, the show-off ride, the one everyone wanted to say they had survived. Wandsworth Council describes it as one of the fair's biggest attractions, a giant coaster rising above the park. And if you've ever been around an old wooden coaster, you know the vibe. It doesn't just run. It rumbles, it shakes, it groans, it clacks its way up the lift hill like it's asking you, are you sure about this? And that's part of the fun. The old wooden coasters have personality. One of my favorite rides in the whole world is actually an old wooden roller coaster. It's at Lagoon in Farmington, Utah. I love that ride. It's so good, and I feel like every time you ride it, it's a little bit different. If you ride it during the day, it's a little slower because of the heat. It expands the wood. And if you ride it at night, it's fast and wild, and it makes a lot more noise. And old wooden roller coasters, well, they have personality. But sometimes personality is just a cute word for, this thing is one bad bolt away from becoming tomorrow's headline. And Battersea's Big Dipper, well, it had history. It had opened with the fun fair in 1951, and by 1972, this ride had been operating for more than 2 decades. It was old but popular. It was dramatic, and according to later reporting, it had already suffered damage from a major fire in 1970 before returning to operation. So picture the scene. It's Tuesday afternoon, May 30th, 1972. Summer energy is in the air. The fairground is alive. Kids are laughing. Teenagers are showing off. Parents are buying snacks. And the Big Dipper is doing what it always does, pulling train after train up that lift hill before sending riders flying over the tracks. On this particular run, the roller coaster train begins climbing the lift hill. And that climb is usually the safest feeling part of the coaster. You're not dropping yet. You're not turning yet. You're just slowly rising, click by click, higher and higher. But that click, click, click sound people associate with lift hills is not just for drama. That sound is part of the safety system. It's connected to an anti-rollback protection, the mechanism that's designed to stop a train from sliding backwards if something goes wrong on the climb. Because if a coaster train is being pulled uphill and the pull system fails, gravity immediately wants to do what gravity does best, ruin everyone's day. And that afternoon on the Big Dipper, that is exactly what happened. Because the train became detached from the pulley system near the top of a roughly 15-meter incline, about 49 feet. And instead of continuing upward, it began rolling backward. The train rolled backward, derailed, and crashed, killing 5 young people and injuring 13 others. Now, here's the part that makes this disaster so horrifying. One failure should not automatically mean catastrophe. A haulage rope can fail, a chain can fail, a cable can fail. That's why there's backup systems. But in this case, the emergency rollback brake, well, that failed too. So the train wasn't stopped, it didn't lock, it didn't catch, it didn't freeze in the place on the lift hill. It just rolled backwards. And then it gathered speed. Imagine being on that train. You're expecting the drop to be in front of you. Instead, suddenly everything reverses. And they didn't have reversing coasters back then. The station is behind you. The track is behind you. And there are people waiting in line that are behind you. And now the ride is moving the wrong way, faster and faster. A survivor later described the moment as everything going into slow motion, remembering the brakeman trying desperately to stop the train as it shot backwards. And that's kind of a chilling detail because it tells you everyone knew something was wrong before impact. There was time to realize it, not enough time to escape, just enough time to understand. The train rolled backward toward the station, it gained speed, and then the rear carriage jumped the rails. It crashed through a barrier and the other carriage smashed down on top of it. This wasn't just a little bump. This wasn't a normal roller coaster malfunction where the ride stops and everyone gets off awkwardly while pretending they weren't scared. This was a violent derailment, a pileup. Wood, metal, bodies, framing in chaos at the base of what's supposed to be a funfair attraction. 5 children were killed, 13 others were injured, and we're not talking little injuries, they were serious injuries. The youngest victim was just 8 years old. And that's where the whole bright funfair image collapses, because this wasn't thrill, this wasn't fear in the fun way. This was a ride doing the one thing riders trust it'll never do: fail completely. After that crash, investigators found something even more disturbing. This was not just one bad moment. A later report found 51 faults on that ride. 51! That number matters because it changes the story. It means that this was not just the rope snapped. It was not just the brake failed. It was the system with problems layered on top of problems. A ride where multiple things had to go wrong, and it did. And that's what makes Battersea's Big Dipper disaster so important in amusement park history. It really shows the danger of older rides being patched, repaired, and kept running while the public assumes everything must be fine because there's a ticket booth and a queue. The ride manager and inspecting engineer were later tried for manslaughter, but both were acquitted in 1973. And for the families, that meant the disaster came with grief, trauma, and the feeling that justice never really landed. The Big Dipper never reopened. It was dismantled and replaced with a modern steel coaster. But the funfair itself never recovered its reputation. And Battersea Park Funfair closed in 1974, just 2 years after the disaster. And for decades, this tragedy has faded from public memory. And don't you think that's another eerie thing about amusement park disasters? Some become legends. Some become documentaries. Some get turned into cautionary tales. And some are whispered by coaster fans forever. But others, they just disappear. And they get picked up by podcasters like me. The park changes, the ride is removed, the midway gets paved over, and eventually people walk through the same place with no idea what happened there. In 2022, on the 50th anniversary of the crash, a memorial ceremony was held in Battersea Park. A cherry tree was planted near the site to remember the 5 young people who died. And that feels important because the Big Dipper disaster wasn't just a freak accident, it was a warning. A reminder that 1970s amusement industry was still finding its way between old funfair engineering and modern safety expectations. It was the era where rides were getting more thrilling, guests were getting more adventurous, and parks were still learning, sometimes terribly. And that excitement without safety is not entertainment, it's a countdown. So as we talk about the 1970s as one of the deadliest amusement park decades, Battersea belongs in that conversation. By the late 1970s, amusement parks were deep in their thrill era. At Luna Park, Sydney, sitting right on the edge of Sydney Harbour in Milsons Point, New South Wales, Australia, one of those attractions was the Ghost Train. And if you love old school dark rides, this one had all the ingredients: dark tunnels, creepy props, skeletons, monsters, a little bit of fear. And that perfect amusement park promise. You're gonna be scared, but you're safe. The Ghost Train had been a part of Luna Park's world for decades. Luna Park Sydney opened in 1935, and the Ghost Train was one of its original style attractions, a classic dark ride that sent guests through narrowing, twisting passageways in small cars. The ride's track was only about 180 meters or nearly 600 feet, and much of the experience happened in darkness. Riders passed scenes with skeletons, monsters, Dracula-style imagery, and a doorway famously marked Hell's Doorway. And honestly, that is deliciously dramatic, don't you think? Because a ride called the Ghost Train, sending people through Hell's Doorway, is supposed to feel dangerous. That's the whole point, right? You scream, you laugh, you pretend you're terrified, then you step off the ride and go buy ice cream. But on June 9th of 1979, the horror stopped being pretend. That night, Luna Park was busy. It was a Saturday, and the Ghost Train was doing exactly what it had done countless times before, taking riders into the dark. Among the guests that night were John Goodson, his wife Jennifer, and their 2 young sons, Damien and Craig. They were visiting from regional New South Wales. The boys had already ridden the Ghost Train once, and they wanted to go again. And at 10 p.m., the park was closed, but Jennifer went to go buy ice cream while her family waited. John and the boys had decided to quickly go on one more ride on the Ghost Train without her. Also on the ride were several boys from Waverley College: Jonathan Billings, Richard Carroll, Michael Johnson, and Seamus Raleigh. Their friend Jason Holman was there too, and he would later be described as the luckiest boy alive, because he survived what his friends did not. Now, picture the ride itself. It's dark, it's enclosed, it's full of tight turns and fake scares. There are props meant to look frightening. There's a fake fireplace effect. There are moments where you're supposed to smell, see, and feel things you don't really understand. That's what makes dark rides fun. But it's also what makes this disaster so terrifying. Because when the fire started, riders did not immediately know what was real. Because inside a haunted attraction, smoke and flames can feel like a part of the show, especially through Hell's Door. A little flicker, a weird smell, a flash of orange light. On a normal ride, those things would scream danger. Inside a Ghost Train, they might look like theming. And that is the nightmare. Because at 10 p.m., a fire broke out inside the Ghost Train. Smoke began pouring from the ride, and people started realizing that something was terribly wrong. Around 35 people were believed to have been on or around the ride as the fire developed. Ride operators and witnesses tried to get people out as the cars emerged from the tunnel. but several riders were still trapped inside. The fire brigade was called out at 10:14 p.m. But when firefighters arrived, they faced a brutal situation. This isn't a clean open-air fire, it was a dark ride, a maze-like attraction filled with combustible materials, enclosed spaces, props, smoke, and just confusion. Firefighters reportedly struggled with access, crowds evacuating the park, and problems with water pressure and hoses. The Museum of Fire notes that the stop message was sent at 11:17 p.m., a little over an hour after the first reports. But crews still had to cool and clear the debris before victims could be recovered. By the time the fire was out, the ghost train was destroyed, and 7 people were dead, 6 children and 1 adult. And this is the part that makes the story almost unbearable. John Goodson and his 2 little boys were later found together. ABC reporting describes John's body positioned as if he had tried to shield Damien and Craig from the fire. That detail is devastating because in the middle of a fake haunted ride with fake monsters and fake fire, fake danger, a father was facing something very real, trying to protect his children in the dark. The 4 Waverly College boys were also found in the wreckage. Their friend Jason Holman had survived, later speaking publicly about the trauma of being pulled from the ride and losing his friends. And then came the question that has haunted this disaster for decades. What actually started the fire? Another episode that I suggest you go listen to. It's actually pretty crazy, and I'm leaning towards arson. And so this is where Luna Park's ghost train fire becomes more than a ride accident. It becomes a mystery. For decades, there have been allegations that the fire may have been deliberately lit. But the official cause has remained disputed, but how the fire started ends with the debate. Was it an accident? Was it negligence? Was it arson? Go ahead and listen to that episode. Tell me what you think. After that fire, Luna Park closed. The ghost train was gone. The site changed. Memorials were created, removed, restored, and debated over the years. And in 2004, a plaque listing the victims' names was placed on the wall of the Big Top Sydney, built on the former ghost train site. And I think that matters because amusement parks are designed to move, the lights come back on, the music starts again, the gates reopen, and the next generation walks in with cotton candy and no idea what happened beneath their feet. But some places remember, and Luna Park Sydney is still there. Its famous giant face still grins over the harbor. By the mid-1980s, amusement parks were no longer just trying to be cute. They were trying to be extreme. Everything had to be bigger, faster, flashier, more impossible looking. And in the 1980s, one of the wildest places on Earth to build a thrill ride was not in a traditional amusement park. It was inside a shopping mall. A massive shopping mall. A mall so big it had stores, restaurants, attractions, a hotel, an indoor water park, and an indoor amusement park. This was West Edmonton Mall in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And inside that mall was a theme park originally called Fantasyland. Later, it was renamed Galaxyland. But West Edmonton Mall opened in 1981, and it became famous as one of the largest indoor shopping centers in the world. Its amusement park was part of that over-the-top 1980s dream. Shopping, entertainment, thrill rides, and spectacle all under one roof. And the star attraction was the Mindbender. The Mindbender officially opened on December 20th, 1985. And it wasn't subtle. This thing was a monster. It was a steel indoor twisting coaster designed by Warner Stegall and built by Anton Schwarzkopf, which are 2 major names in roller coaster engineering. It stood about 44.2 meters, reaching speeds around 96.5 kilometers per hour, because we're in Canada, and it featured 3 vertical loops. For years, it was promoted as one of the biggest indoor roller coasters in the world. And that's what made it so exciting. Imagine walking through the mall with your shopping bags, and overhead, a roller coaster is screaming through loops Not outside, not in some separate amusement park, right there in the mall. As a kid, I would have loved that. You have the food court, you have stores, and a roller coaster. Families, teenagers, shoppers, and people who probably just came to buy jeans accidentally found themselves under a steel screaming machine. It sounds like such a great idea. The Mindbender was everything in the 1980s. It was bold, excessive, futuristic, and just a little bit ridiculous. In the best way. But less than a year after it opened, the ride became infamous for a very different reason. On the evening of June 14, 1986, a train was running through the Mindbender's course. The ride had already moved through part of its layout, including loops and high-speed turns. The passengers were deep into the ride cycle, the kind of movement where riders are usually screaming, laughing, and bracing themselves for the next inversion. But then something went wrong with the train's fourth car. A wheel assembly failed. Reports and later summaries describe the wheels assembly as coming apart or detaching, which allows the rear car to derail. The car began moving improperly along the track, swaying and dragging while the rest of the train continued forward. In my mind, this kind of seems like Final Destination-ish, because this is where the whole disaster becomes terrifying. The roller coasters, they're not designed to get out of control. Every wheel, every bolt, every restraint, the brake, every support, they all have to work together. And the ride may feel chaotic to the rider, but mechanically, it's supposed to be controlled chaos. But when the wheel assembly failed, that control broke apart. The fourth car derailed before the final loop. As the damaged car dragged, the restraints were compromised. 4 passengers were thrown from the car onto the concrete floor below. 3 of them died instantly, and the 4th was critically injured and taken away. The rest of the train kept moving. That detail is horrifying. The train didn't simply stop the second something went wrong, it continued forward towards the final loop. But because of the derailed car, created friction and it slowed the train, the coaster did not have enough speed to complete the loop. It rolled backward down the loop and the detached car slammed into a concrete pilar, bringing the train to a violent stop. So you have to picture the scene. There are people shopping in the mall, families walking around, maybe someone is eating, maybe someone is waiting for a friend. Kids are looking up at this massive indoor coaster because this is the coolest thing they've ever seen. And suddenly the sound changes. The normal roar of the roller coaster becomes something else. At least 15 people were injured, and some sources say that 19 others were treated for less severe injuries. The survivor who was thrown from the car, Rod Chaco, and he later spoke publicly about the crash and how it changed his life. But he described the long-term impact of his injuries and trauma. And then came the investigation. A public inquiry followed the crash. The University of Alberta Alumni Association later noted that the Alberta Minister of Labour announced a public inquiry after the accident, and that it was already known soon after the crash that a fastener failure was involved in some way. Later reporting found that the 4 cap screws holding the wheel assembly together had failed, and other summaries described bolts working loose and allowing the wheel assembly to come off the roller coaster car. Investigators point towards a combination of design flaws and unsatisfactory or inadequate maintenance routines. This wasn't just a roller coaster that broke. This was a high-profile, high-speed thrill machine that depended on tiny components doing their job perfectly. And those components failed, and the entire illusion of safety collapsed. The Mindbender was closed after the accident, and when it reopened in January of 1987, changes were made to the trains. Existing 4-car trains were converted into 3-car trains. Additional wheel assemblies were added, anti-rollback features were installed, and restraints were upgraded with seatbelts and shoulder headrests. That is one of the recurring patterns in amusement park history. A tragedy happens, and then safety improvements arrive. And that's exactly why these stories matter. Not because we want to ruin amusement parks. I really don't. I love amusement parks. But I want people to realize that every modern safety feature has a history. Every restraint, every inspection, maintenance checklist, emergency brake system, every bolt that gets checked twice, somewhere behind it, there is a story of why. And most of the time, that story is horrific. The Mindbender continued operating for decades after the crash and was eventually decommissioned in 2023 after 37 years of service. But even after the ride was gone, the 1986 accident remained part of its legacy because the Mindbender was supposed to represent the future of amusement parks, a giant indoor coaster inside a massive mall. So, how many amusement park and fair accidents happened in the 1970s and 1980s? The unsettling answer is, I don't fully know. There is no perfect national master list, especially for fixed amusement parks. And many incidents were reported locally if they reported clearly at all. But by the late 1980s, federal records were already documenting multiple ride-related deaths every single year. It started in 1987, and in just 1987, 1988, and 1989, the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission documented 14 amusement-related fatalities. And later data would estimate an average about 4.5 related deaths per year. So while we can't put one exact number on the entire 1970s and 80s, we can say that these decades were not just the age of bigger thrills, they were the age where the industry was beginning to feel forced to confront what happened when rides become faster, parks become more crowded, and safety systems couldn't always keep up. So I can't put a number on it, but it was a lot. One of my first episodes I did, which I kind of cringe at those early episodes, I was so boring, but it was about Lagoon in Farmington, Utah. Lagoon had 2 ride-related deaths in 1989 alone. One on a children's roller coaster and one on its historic wooden roller coaster, making that year one of the darkest in the park's modern history. So that brings us from the early 1900s all the way through the 1980s. From wooden parks lit by thousands of electric bulbs, to post-war family fun fairs, to looping coasters, haunted attractions, indoor thrill machines, and water parks that sometimes felt less like recreation and more like a game of truth or dare with a waiver. And if there's one thing these decades teach us, it's amusement parks have always been built on trust. We trust the track, the brake, the lap bar, and the ride operator. We trust that fear is fake, and most of the time, it is. Most people walk off the ride laughing, dizzy, windblown, and immediately ready to make another questionable decision with a funnel cake in their hand. But in every decade we covered today, that trust broke. In the early 1900s, parks were built so quickly that safety could barely keep up. Wooden structures, electricity, packed crowds, open flames, and almost no national oversight created a world where the line between magic and disaster was dangerously thin. Parks like Dreamland at Coney Island looked like glowing fantasy cities, but underneath the lights were wood wires, crowds, and fire hazards waiting for just one bad spark. And then the 1950s and 60s arrived, and the amusement parks started to look cleaner, brighter, and family-friendly. Disneyland changed the industry. Parks became destinations. The future looked polished. But behind the colorful signs and smiling guests, many rides were still aging. Traveling attractions were still being assembled and reassembled. Wooden coasters were still rattling through summer nights, and safety standards were still catching up to the speed of the industry. The 70s and 80s were dangerous because parks looked at fear and said, okay, but can we make it bigger? This was the thrill era. Bigger coasters, faster rides, darker rides. This is the era that gave us the Battersea Park Big Dipper disaster. It gave us the Luna Park Sydney Ghost Train fire and the Mindbender derailment in West Edmonton Mall. And of course, it gave you Action Park, where the atmosphere was so chaotic, it was renamed Traction Park. That's not even subtle. But the point of this episode isn't that amusement parks are death traps. They are not. The point is that every safety rule we have now came from somewhere. Every inspection checklist, every restraint system, every fire exit, height requirement, warning signs that make you briefly wonder whether riding this thing is a good idea. But all of these rides have a history behind them, and sometimes that history is tragic. Because amusement parks are strange, beautiful places. They're built to make us forget danger while carefully controlling it. They sell us fear in a safe little package. A scream that ends when the train breaks. A haunted house where the monsters are fake. And a drop that stops before it becomes a disaster. But in the stories we covered today, there are moments when that control failed. When the fear stopped being a part of the ride and became the headline. And next time, we're moving into the 1990s and beyond, the era of extreme rides, water park disasters, high-tech coasters, medical emergencies, lawsuits, viral videos, and modern amusement parks that are safer than ever, but still not accident-free. Because by the 1990s, the parks had better branding, the rides looked newer, the warning signs got longer, the lawyers got involved, and the danger didn't disappear. It just got better lighting. So come back for part 2. I didn't want to do this in a 2-part episode, but I have already been recording for over an hour. So next week, we're going to step into the modern era of amusement park accidents. So come back next week for part 2, where we're going to step into the modern era of amusement park accidents. Until then, keep your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the ride at all times. Read the warning signs. Do not stand up on the coasters. Do not just trust a ride because it has flashing lights. And remember, behind every safety rule, there's usually a story. My name is Marissa. Thank you for listening to Death Kiss Traveler. If you enjoyed this episode, please give me a 5-star review wherever you are listening. I really appreciate the support. This episode is written and researched by me, Marissa. Produced by Sunkissed Traveler, the travel agency that takes the stress out of planning a vacation. With great deals on amusement parks, cruises, or how about an all-inclusive resort to the Caribbean. Wherever you want to travel, Sunkissed Traveler can help. See show notes for details or visit sun-kissedtraveler.com. And my friends, I got added to a collective of other podcasters that have the same dark interests: history, horror, hauntings, and more. Here is another podcaster that I think you guys would love.
Looking for your next obsession? The Creators Collective Podcasts is your gateway to the dark, the chilling, and the downright fascinating. We're a community of independent podcasts with one goal: to share the best in true crime, paranormal tales, folklore, and unexplained mysteries. Whether you crave cold cases that won't stay closed, haunted histories that refuse to be forgotten, or stories that make you sleep with the lights on, there's a show waiting for you in the collective. And when you join us, you're not just listening to one podcast. You're stepping into a world of creators who love this stuff as much as you do. Check out the Creators Collective today. Follow the link in our show notes to discover your next favorite podcast. We'll be waiting for you.